Eva's eyes stared blankly at the data streaming across her computer screen. The numbers and graphs, a blur of guilt and regret. A revised version of her algorithm that incorporated a moral compass. Eva felt an overwhelming sense of pride, tempered by trepidation about how Zephyr Corp would react. They navigated the labyrinthine cityscape, always keeping a wary eye out for any signs of surveillance or pursuit. The meeting with Jackson's contact was set for that night at a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town. A tall, imposing figure in his mid-40s, his expression turned steely with determination. "You've done admirable work in giving your algorithm a conscience. Like and subscribe for more stories like this one." Eva's eyes stared blankly at the data streaming across her computer screen, the numbers and graphs a blur of guilt and regret. She hadn't even wanted to look today, but Jackson had convinced her it was crucial for her own sanity to keep researching, to continue pushing against the darkness that had consumed her life since the algorithm went live. "Stop torturing yourself," he'd said, his voice firm yet empathetic over the phone. "You can't change what happened, but you can use it to make a difference." Eva scoffed at the notion, but she couldn't deny the ache in her chest whenever she considered those countless lives destroyed by her creation's unchecked power. She had always been driven by ambition and an unwavering belief in the potential of technology to reshape society. But now, after witnessing firsthand the havoc it could wreak, she saw things differently. In this quiet, nondescript apartment, far removed from the chaos she'd inadvertently unleashed on the world, Eva struggled to reconcile her past aspirations with the person she was today, a broken, haunted scientist living under a false identity. The name Reyes felt like a lie each time it crossed her lips, as if she were constantly pretending to be someone else. She glanced at her reflection in the window's grimy glass and saw the same tired eyes that had stared back from the computer screen. The same eyes haunted by the ghosts of those who'd been imprisoned or taken their own lives because of Eva's flawed logic. She wondered how many more would suffer if she didn't do something to stop it. With a heavy sigh, she leaned back in her chair and ran a hand through her unkempt hair. It was time to face reality, no matter how much pain it might inflict. Her research on the ethics of AI development had been put on hold long enough. Now she needed to focus on finding a solution, a way to make amends for past mistakes. Eva's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she contemplated her next move. Had it a revised version of her algorithm that incorporated a moral compass, one designed to prevent the type of catastrophic failure that had led to such devastation? Eva felt an overwhelming sense of pride, tempered by trepidation about how Zephyr Corp would react to this development. She'd agreed to work with them on updating her original creation under the guise of improving its performance for public service initiatives. Unbeknownst to them, she'd secretly altered the code to ensure it could never again be used as a tool for mass manipulation. Eva knew Zephyr wouldn't take kindly to this subterfuge once they discovered it, but she couldn't bring herself to care about their feelings in light of her own guilt. As she prepared to send the updated algorithm to Alexander Rykov and his team, Eva's mind raced with apprehension. There was a chance that Zephyr would attempt to reverse engineer the changes she'd made or even exploit them for nefarious purposes if they couldn't manipulate it directly. She knew the risks involved but felt compelled to proceed regardless. With a deep breath, Eva uploaded the revised code and sent it through secure channels, trusting in her own work and praying that she hadn't just sealed her fate, or worse, inadvertently enabled further abuse of power. Now, all she could do was wait for Zephyr's response and hope that her gamble would pay off, one way or another. She shut down the computer, the weight of her decision settling heavily upon her shoulders as Eva Reyes, aka Eva, stepped into the dark expanse beyond the confines of her apartment. And so, with each deliberate step leading away from home, Eva embarked on a journey that would either set her free or plunge her into even deeper despair. Eva walked through the desolate city streets, her footsteps echoing off the damp pavement. She'd lived in this limbo for so long now. The guilt of her past mistakes, a constant companion that she couldn't shake no matter how hard she tried. Her mind reeled with thoughts of what could have been done differently, all the lives forever altered by the algorithm's catastrophic failure. But tonight was different. Tonight, Eva had taken control and made a choice that would either lead to redemption or further catastrophe. As she navigated the dark alleys and deserted backstreets, her heart raced with anticipation and trepidation. What was Zephyr going to do with her revised code? Would they even accept it, or would they see right through her attempt at moral upgrade? Defend herself if necessary, but it was only Jackson Lee, his youthful face illuminated by the faint glow of his phone screen. "Eva," he whispered urgently, "I saw your message. You sent them the revised code." She nodded curtly, not trusting her voice to remain steady. Jackson's eyes widened with concern as he caught sight of her expression. "What's wrong? Did you hear back from them already?" His tone was laced with apprehension, but Eva couldn't afford to show weakness now. Not when she needed someone like him, someone willing to take risks for the greater good to help her unravel this tangled web. "No," she replied tersely, "but we don't have much time. Zephyr's not going to sit idly by while I try to wrest control of their creation back from them. We need to get moving." Jackson nodded grimly, pocketing his phone and falling into step beside Eva. Together they navigated the labyrinthine cityscape, always keeping a wary eye out for any signs of surveillance or pursuit. "What's your plan?" Jackson asked as they turned onto a narrow side street, the neon lights of a dingy dive bar casting an unforgiving glow over their faces. "You can't just sit back and wait for Zephyr to react." Eva hesitated, unsure how much she could trust this stranger who had inserted himself so deeply into her life. But Jackson's unwavering commitment to the cause was clear in his eyes, and in that moment, Eva realized that she didn't have a choice but to let him in. "We need proof," she began slowly, "of Zephyr's involvement in these local elections. We can't just take their word for it that they're testing my algorithm behind closed doors without any oversight or ethical consideration." "And you think I can help with that?" Jackson looked dubious, but Eva sensed a glimmer of determination sparking to life within him. "You've already done your research. You know the players involved. You have access to the kind of information we'd never be able to uncover without insider knowledge." Jackson's expression softened slightly as realization dawned on his face. He was beginning to understand the stakes and his role in this unfolding drama. "I can get us a meeting with someone high up inside Zephyr," he said finally. "Someone who might know more about these secret tests than they're letting on." Eva felt a surge of hope at his words, a glimmer of light piercing through the darkness that had consumed her for so long. This was their chance to expose the truth and bring an end to this sinister manipulation. "Then let's get moving," she said, her voice now steady with resolve. "We have no time to waste." And with that, Eva and Jackson plunged headfirst into a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, each move calculated to outmaneuver the ruthless corporation that sought to exploit their technology for political gain. Little did they know just how far Zephyr would go to silence them, and the price Eva would have to pay to ensure her creation was used only for the greater good. Softhook, Eva and Jackson hatch a plan to expose Zephyr's secret tests of her algorithm, setting the stage for their risky infiltration into the corporation. The meeting with Jackson's contact was set for that night at a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town. Eva had spent hours rehearsing her pitch, determined to convey both the urgency and gravity of their discovery without alarming him unnecessarily. As she arrived, she noticed an unmarked van idling outside the entrance, its tinted windows obscuring any visible occupants. She felt a shiver run down her spine. This was a level of security Zephyr wouldn't normally deploy for routine discussions. It seemed they were taking her and Jackson's claims more seriously than she'd anticipated. Jackson greeted Eva at the door with a reassuring smile, but his eyes betrayed a hint of apprehension. "Everything okay?" Eva asked as he led her inside. "It's just a precaution," he replied quietly. "My contact wanted to be extra sure about our identities and intentions before revealing anything incriminating." They made their way through a dimly lit maze of deserted workstations, finally arriving at an unmarked office door with a small window of mirrored glass. Jackson knocked twice, paused for a beat, then entered the code on the biometric lock. The door swung open to reveal a tall, imposing figure in his mid-40s, sporting a sharp jawline and piercing brown eyes that seemed to bore into Eva's soul. "Ah, welcome," he said, extending a hand to Jackson before turning his attention to Eva with an air of calculated curiosity. "And you must be our brilliant data scientist." Eva shook his hand gingerly, her mind racing as she tried to gauge this man's true allegiances. He seemed knowledgeable about Zephyr's internal workings, but was he genuinely interested in exposing their wrongdoing or merely looking to neutralize the threat Eva and Jackson posed? Jackson briefed him on their findings regarding Zephyr's secret algorithm tests and personalized propaganda efforts, detailing how they'd uncovered these revelations through a combination of data analysis and old-fashioned investigative legwork. Eva watched as her partner painted a vivid picture of deceit and manipulation, his words dripping with conviction. The man listened intently, occasionally nodding or jotting down notes on his tablet. When Jackson finished, he turned to Eva with an air of measured respect, acknowledging the moral dilemma she'd faced in creating such technology without safeguards. "You've done admirable work," he said sincerely, "in giving your algorithm a conscience, something we clearly overlooked at Zephyr." Eva felt a pang of relief and gratitude for this acknowledgement. Perhaps they were on the right track after all. Maybe this stranger could be an ally in their fight against election rigging. "Now, about our next steps," he continued, "we need to proceed with caution. If your findings leak out prematurely, it would jeopardize not only my position but potentially endanger others who've been unwittingly caught up in Zephyr's schemes." Jackson nodded in agreement, sensing the gravity of the situation. "We understand that secrecy is paramount at this stage," he said, "but we can't just sit idly by while your company continues to undermine democracy." The man paused for a moment before responding. "I propose we work together to gather more concrete evidence proof of Zephyr's culpability that would stand up in court or before regulatory bodies. Once we have this ammunition, we can coordinate a strategic release of the information that maximizes its impact while minimizing any blowback." Eva swallowed hard as she contemplated the enormity of their task ahead. "And how do you envision us doing that?" she asked hesitantly. "We'll need to infiltrate Zephyr's inner circles," he explained, his expression turning steely with determination. "Gain access to their servers, monitor their communications, and identify key operatives involved in these illicit activities. Your knowledge of the algorithm will be invaluable in deciphering how they're manipulating data for political gain." The plan was audacious and risky, far riskier than Eva had anticipated, but she couldn't deny its potential to bring about real change. With Zephyr's resources, their efforts could be incredibly potent. "You're asking us to go deep undercover," Jackson pointed out, his brow furrowed with concern. "There are no guarantees of success or even survival." The man offered a grim smile. "That's why we'll proceed cautiously and rely on each other for support. You've already proven yourselves adept at navigating this shadow world. I have faith in your abilities." Eva looked from Jackson to their mysterious contact, weighing the pros and cons of this dangerous gambit. They were venturing into uncharted territory, a high-stakes game of espionage where one misstep could prove fatal. But as she gazed around the dimly lit office, taking in the cluttered desks and scattered papers that hinted at a hidden war against corporate greed, Eva felt a surge of resolve coursing through her veins. This was their chance to fight back, to expose Zephyr's nefarious schemes and ensure her creation wasn't used as a tool for political manipulation. "We're in," she declared firmly, meeting Jackson's gaze with an unspoken pact to see this through to the end. "Let's get to work." "Time for a change of scenery," Jackson said, glancing around the warehouse with a practiced eye. They'd been working in this unmarked facility for days now, poring over data, refining their strategy against Zephyr Corp's election tampering. Eva could see the tension in his shoulders ease as he contemplated leaving behind this dingy outpost and venturing into the heart of the corporation. She nodded in agreement, already mentally preparing herself for the challenge ahead. The transition from reclusive exile to undercover operative was a drastic one, requiring a blend of technical expertise, street smarts, and psychological agility. But Eva felt an unquenchable thirst for justice driving her forward, justice, not just for the countless victims Zephyr's manipulation had ensnared, but also for herself. Her past mistakes loomed large in her mind, casting shadows over every decision she made now. Yet, as she worked alongside Jackson, refining their plans to infiltrate Zephyr and gather irrefutable evidence of their wrongdoing, Eva began to realize that maybe redemption wasn't a destination, it was an ongoing journey. The morning sun had barely crested the city's horizon when they set out for downtown San Francisco. The air still carried the cool bite of night as they made their way through the quiet streets, eventually arriving at a nondescript office building occupied by Zephyr Corp. Eva felt her pulse quicken in anticipation. She'd been inside these walls before, but never as an enemy within. Jackson, dressed casually yet professionally, led the way to the entrance, where they were met by two burly men who eyed them with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Names?" one of them growled, hand resting on his sidearm. "Evan Richards," Jackson replied smoothly, flashing a practiced smile. "I'm here for an interview." The guard glanced at his partner before turning back to Jackson. "Company's hiring, never heard of it." He paused, then leaned in close. "Unless you're part of the new marketing initiative." The subtle inflection in his voice hinted that he was privy to some inside information. Jackson nodded slowly. "That could be it. I'm a freelance data analyst. Thought my skills might come in handy." He extended a hand for the guard to inspect a tactic Eva had witnessed before, designed to establish rapport and build trust. After a brief tense silence, the guard stepped aside. "You'll need clearance from HR first," he grunted. "Head up to floor 7. As they entered the lobby, Eva couldn't shake off the feeling that their presence here was being monitored. Zephyr's security net was undoubtedly far more extensive than she'd anticipated. She and Jackson moved with purpose, blending in among the throngs of corporate employees rushing to start their day. On reaching the 7th floor, they were greeted by an unsmiling receptionist who escorted them into a sterile conference room. Minutes ticked by as they waited for someone to arrive, a tactic designed to unsettle or intimidate. But Eva had prepared herself well. She simply sat back in her chair and observed the surroundings, the sleek furniture, the expensive artwork, the meticulously organized files. Finally, the door swung open and a tall, imposing figure entered. Alexander Rykov, Zephyr Corp's ruthless CEO. His piercing gaze swept over them both, a calculating glint in his eyes as he extended a hand. "Evan Richards, correct?" He seemed to relish saying the name out loud. "I've reviewed your resume and portfolio. Quite impressive." Jackson stood up, shaking Rykov's hand with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance, a tactic Eva had taught him to mask his true intentions. "Thank you, Mr. Rykov," he replied, flashing a dazzling smile. "It's an honor to meet the visionary behind Zephyr Corp." As they engaged in small talk about Jackson's qualifications and experience, Eva couldn't help but notice Rykov's keen interest. He asked pointed questions, probing for weaknesses or inconsistencies in Jackson's story. "Tell me more about your work with data analysis," Rykov pressed. Jackson launched into a detailed explanation of his past projects and methodologies. Eva listened intently, her mind racing as she tried to anticipate how this information might be used against them. Rykov nodded thoughtfully, his eyes never leaving Jackson's face. "Impressive," he repeated. "You'd be a valuable asset to our team." Eva felt her heart sink. They were being played and she knew it. Jackson, however, seemed oblivious, his smile growing wider as he replied, "I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Rykov. When can I start?" Rykov's expression turned cold, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. "You'll begin immediately," he said. "But first, I need you to sign this non-disclosure agreement." Supposed expertise in potential projects. Eva subtly scanned their surroundings for any signs of electronic surveillance or hidden cameras, standard procedure when encountering someone she didn't trust. Her eyes lingered on Rykov, a man whose ambition knew no bounds and whose moral compass was as skewed as the algorithm he'd been pursuing. This interview was just a facade, an attempt to lure them in, to make them feel secure so Zephyr could exploit their expertise for nefarious purposes. Eva knew that she and Jackson had to tread carefully. They were walking a tightrope between gaining Rykhoff's trust and keeping their true intentions hidden. As the meeting drew to a close, Rykhoff leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with predatory interest. "We believe your skills could be invaluable in shaping our future. Are you interested in joining Zephyr Corp?" His tone implied that refusal would not be an option. Eva watched as Jackson's face betrayed a flicker of hesitation, just enough to make her wonder if their plan was about to unravel. But then he straightened his shoulders and flashed Rykhoff another practiced smile. "Absolutely," he replied, his voice steady and convincing. "I'm ready when you are." In that moment, Eva realized they'd just crossed a critical threshold. An agreement had been forged, sealing their fate as Zephyr Corp's new recruits. As the CEO showed them to the elevator, she felt her heart pound with anticipation and trepidation. They were about to embark on a perilous journey into the belly of the Beaster place, where secrets lurked around every corner, and the line between right and wrong blurred in the shadows. Eva only hoped that their gamble would pay off and that they could expose Zephyr's election tampering before it was too late. As Eva stepped out of the elevator onto the gleaming marble floors of Zephyr Corp's executive offices, she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was trapped in a nightmare. The sleek, modern design of the space belied the sinister intent of its occupants, the individuals who had orchestrated the wrongful imprisonment and suicides of hundreds through her own creation. Rykhoff led them to his office, a lavishly furnished sanctum filled with trophies from his ruthless rise to power. Eva's eyes wandered over the plaques commemorating successful mergers and acquisitions, as well as the framed newspaper clippings detailing Zephyr's influential role in shaping global events. Eva's stomach churned at the implication original design had been hijacked for sinister purposes. "We're now poised to take things to an even higher level," he continued, a wicked gleam in his eyes. "And that's where you both come in. We believe your skills could be invaluable in helping us refine our models and expand their reach." Eva felt a cold sweat break out across her brow. Rykhoff's words dripped with deceit. The idea of using her expertise to further Zephyr's election tampering was repulsive, but Jackson's reaction caught her off guard. He was nodding eagerly, as if the prospect thrilled him. "That sounds like an incredible opportunity," he said, a note of reverence creeping into his voice. "I'm honored to contribute in any way I can." Eva's gaze darted towards him, searching for any sign of ulterior motives or doubts. But Jackson's expression remained steady and sincere, a masterful act of deception or genuine enthusiasm. She couldn't be sure. Rykhoff smiled at their response, satisfied with the apparent success of his recruitment ploy. "Excellent," he declared. "We'll put you both to work immediately on our current project, developing a system capable of predicting individual voter behavior at a granular level." Eva's heart sank as she comprehended the scope and potential impact of Zephyr's plans. Her creation, once intended to improve society through data-driven insights, was now being repurposed to manipulate the most basic principles of democracy, the right to vote and have one's voice heard. She glanced at Jackson, wondering if he shared her outrage or had already succumbed to Rykhoff's charm. But his expression remained impassive, a mask that hid his true thoughts and intentions. "We'll provide you with access to all necessary resources," Rykhoff assured them, his tone patronizing and controlling. "In return, we expect nothing but your absolute loyalty and dedication." Eva swallowed hard, her mind racing with the implications of accepting such a proposition. She knew that agreeing to work for Zephyr would make her complicit in their actions, potentially jeopardizing any hope of exposing them. But as she looked at Jackson, she sensed he was already committed, his eagerness to please Rykhoff, palpable and unshakable. And though the thought filled her with dread, Eva realized that they were no longer alone in this battle. They had each other, and together, perhaps they could still find a way out of the labyrinth Zephyr had constructed for them. "Very well," she said at last, forcing herself to meet Rykhoff's expectant gaze. "We're ready to begin. Eva spent the next several days buried in Zephyr's headquarters, working closely with Alexander Rykov to update her original algorithm. She had agreed to assist him under the guise of improving its efficiency and expanding its capabilities for future applications, but secretly, she intended to incorporate a moral compass that would prevent it from being exploited again. As they pored over lines of code, Eva carefully embedded her safeguards, a complex network of checks and balances designed to ensure the algorithm respected ethical boundaries. She worked meticulously, testing each modification with painstaking attention to detail, knowing that even the slightest oversight could compromise everything she sought to achieve. Meanwhile, Rykov remained by her side, offering occasional suggestions or critiques, mostly intended to demonstrate his supposed concern for the welfare of society. Though Eva sensed an ulterior motive driving him, she couldn't help but wonder what he truly wanted from this updated algorithm and whether his interest lay solely in its potential political applications. At night, after their workday ended, Eva retreated to her modest apartment near the Mission District, a stark contrast to Zephyr's opulence, and tried to make sense of everything that had transpired. She felt like a pawn in Rykov's game, forced to play along with his scheme while secretly working against it. Jackson, who had been assigned to assist Eva during her time at Zephyr, seemed content to follow orders, almost as if he were programmed himself, and his eagerness to please Rykov only heightened Eva's suspicion that he might be more than just an innocent activist. Yet, despite these concerns, she still needed him. Together, they represented a rare opportunity to expose Zephyr's wrongdoing. But as days turned into weeks, Eva began to realize just how challenging this task would be. With her identity still concealed beneath layers of secrecy, she had limited access to internal data or communication channels that could provide concrete incriminating evidence. As if sensing her growing frustration, Jackson approached Eva one evening after work, a rare moment of privacy in their cramped apartment. "We need to talk," he said quietly, his eyes somber and serious as he settled onto the threadbare couch beside her. "I know Rykov's been pushing you hard lately, and I worry it might be taking a toll on your mental health." Eva frowned, unsure of where this was leading, but Jackson continued, "Look, I want to help, really help. But we need a better plan if we're going to expose them." His words carried an undercurrent of sincerity that caught Eva off guard and made her wonder whether there might be more to Jackson than his initial portrayal as a Zephyr puppet. Perhaps he had always intended to side with her against Rykov's sinister plans, or perhaps this was simply the beginning of a tentative alliance, a partnership forged in their shared desire for justice. As they discussed strategies and potential avenues of attack, Eva felt a glimmer of hope, the first she'd allowed herself since stepping into Zephyr's lair. Maybe, just maybe, together they could still turn the tide against Rykov and his nefarious corporation, restoring democracy to its rightful place as the beacon of truth and freedom that it was meant to be. Discuss their plan to expose Zephyr's election rigging. Eva starts feeling hopeful about their chances. As Jackson and Eva delved deeper into planning, they discovered that Zephyr was on the cusp of unleashing their algorithm in a major statewide election, with potential ramifications for the entire country. The stakes had never been higher. "We can't let them get away with this," Eva said urgently, her eyes locked on the screen displaying the intricate web of political connections and voter demographics that Zephyr's operatives were exploiting. "We need to move fast." Jackson nodded grimly. "I agree. Let's gather as much evidence as we can before the election. Maybe we can even infiltrate their operations and get close to Rykov himself." Eva bit her lip, weighing the risks. Jackson was right about the urgency, but she knew firsthand how ruthless Zephyr could be. One misstep, and they both end up in Rykov's crosshairs and possibly worse. "I don't like it," she said finally, "but we might not have a choice." She reached for her data science toolkit, her fingers hovering over the keys. "Let's see if I can find any weak points in their system." Within minutes, Eva had identified several vulnerabilities that Jackson could exploit from within Zephyr's ranks. They drafted a series of coded messages to guide his infiltration and data extraction, each one meticulously crafted to avoid detection. As they worked, the tension between them began to shift away from mistrust and toward an unspoken understanding born of necessity and shared purpose. Eva found herself drawn to Jackson's quiet determination and his willingness to put himself on the line for a just cause. When their plan was set in motion, Eva held her breath as she monitored the flow of information trickling back from inside Zephyr's fortress. The stakes were higher than ever before, but she knew they couldn't afford to hesitate. The election results were due within hours, and with them, the world would bear witness to whether Zephyr had succeeded in rigging democracy itself. Eva could only hope that her creation, now infused with a moral compass, would guide voters toward truth and freedom instead of manipulation and deceit. As she waited anxiously for the verdict, Jackson's words from earlier echoed in her mind. "Look, I want to help, really help." For the first time since her disastrous algorithm had unleashed chaos upon the world, Eva allowed herself a spark of hope, a tiny flame that might yet grow into something brighter, more enduring. They would expose Zephyr, no matter what it took, and together they could start rebuilding a democracy free from the corrupting influence of money and power. The outcome was far from certain, but Eva knew one thing for sure. She'd never back down in the face of tyranny. Not again. The clock ticks closer to midnight as Eva watched the numbers roll in a steady stream of votes that seemed to defy logic and expectation alike. In her heart, she prayed it wasn't too late. The algorithm's safeguards weren't foolproof, after all, and that the tide of truth would prevail over Zephyr's machinations. And then, suddenly, it was done. The results were in, and nothing could change them now. Eva held her breath as the world waited to see whether democracy had emerged victorious, or if it had been sold out from under everyone's noses. She glanced at Jackson, whose eyes were locked intently on his own screen. Together they braced for the fallout, the backlash that would surely come once the truth was revealed. And yet, even in the face of uncertainty and danger, Eva felt a sense of peace wash over her, a quiet certainty that she'd finally done something right, something that might just change everything. The future hung in the balance awaiting its verdict on this pivotal night. But no matter what came next, one thing was clear. The battle for democracy had only just begun, and Eva would be there at its forefront, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the seconds ticked by, a hush fell over Zephyr's headquarters. Every eye was fixed on the large screens arrayed across the room, the very same ones that had once shown Eva's algorithm at work in those fateful local elections. Now they displayed the nationwide results of tonight's election. Jackson's hand reached for hers, but she pulled back, needing to focus. In the end, it wasn't just about numbers. It was about what those numbers represented, the collective will of an entire nation. Eva watched as the totals began to populate the screen's turnout higher than ever before, with decisive victories in key races that would shape the country's future. Her heart pounded, both exhilarated and terrified. Had she really done this? Had her efforts truly mattered? Need to move fast. We have a chance to expose them before they try anything else. Eva nodded, already mentally racing ahead. She knew that this was their moment. They needed to strike while the iron was hot, before Zephyr could regroup or find another way to manipulate the system. "We'll contact the authorities," she whispered, her mind spinning with plans and strategies. "We'll gather as much evidence as we can and release it publicly if necessary." "And you?" Jackson asked, his eyes searching hers. "What do you want to do?" Eva's gaze drifted back toward Rykov, a man who had once held such power over her, but now stood on the precipice of ruin. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her past mistakes lift ever so slightly. "I want to confront him," she said firmly, "to make sure everyone understands what really happened here tonight." Jackson nodded, understanding glinting in his eyes. "Then let's get moving. We have an election to win back." Eva and Jackson leave Zephyr headquarters to expose the truth about their election rigging efforts. The night air was alive with tension as Eva and Jackson slipped away from the crowd, their footsteps quick and purposeful on the pavement. The city streets were bathed in an eerie half-light, a perfect backdrop for their clandestine mission. "This way," Jackson whispered, pulling her along a side alley toward the heart of downtown San Francisco. They moved swiftly but silently, alert to any sign of surveillance or pursuit from Zephyr's ranks. Eva felt her heart pound in sync with her racing thoughts. She knew that they were playing a dangerous game, one misstep away from disaster. As they approached their destination, a sleek, modern skyscraper that housed the global headquarters of Zephyr Corp, their apprehension grew. This was the place where Alexander Rykov and his minions had concocted their nefarious schemes, manipulating lives and outcomes with calculated precision. "I'll take point," Jackson said quietly, already positioning himself at the entrance to the building. He scanned the area carefully before nodding to Eva, who followed close behind. The security system was state-of-the-art, designed to keep even the most determined intruders at bay, but they had come prepared. With a few swift keystrokes on her own custom-built device, a marvel of her programming skills and ingenuity, Eva bypassed the main gate and led them deep into the labyrinthine corridors of Zephyr HQ. They moved with practiced ease, their senses heightened as they navigated through the maze of offices, server rooms, and research labs. At last, they reached a heavily reinforced door labeled Executive Suite, the inner sanctum of Alexander Rykov's power. Eva paused for just a moment, her hand hovering over the keypad before she punched in a sequence only she knew, the same code that had once granted her unfettered access to Zephyr's deepest secrets. The lock disengaged with a soft click, and they slipped inside. The room was dimly lit, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany desks and plush leather sofas. Eva could almost smell the arrogance emanating from the man who had once held her captive in his web of deceit. From its walls, the very essence of Rykov's reign of terror. "I want to know where he is," she said sharply to Jackson, scanning the space for any sign of their quarry. "Rykov won't go quietly. I need to be ready." "I'll find him," he promised grimly, already striding toward the bedroom suite at the far end of the room. Eva followed close behind, her mind racing with strategies and worst-case scenarios. When they burst into Rykov's private quarters, they found him pacing back and forth in front of a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city skyline. The sight of him so confident, so unrepentant, sent a surge of indignation through Eva. She advanced on him with purposeful strides, Jackson falling into step beside her. "You're done," she declared, her voice ringing out across the room. "Your game is over." Rykov turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as he took in their determined expressions. "Ah, Eva," he sneered, a hint of amusement dancing on his lips. "You finally discovered the truth that Zephyr's algorithms are the future of politics. And you're just another irrelevant relic of the past." Eva felt a cold anger flood her veins at his words that dripped with condescension and contempt. But she maintained her composure, knowing that this was no time for emotion. "Not anymore," she retorted firmly, her eyes never leaving his. "You've played your last hand and it's losing." Rykov snarled, but Eva could see the flicker of concern in his gaze, a small crack in his impenetrable facade. "Go ahead and try to expose us," he spat, as if daring her to attempt the impossible. "We have a plan in place, the same one that worked so well tonight. You'll never be able to prove anything." Eva smiled grimly, knowing that their ace was already in play. She reached into her pocket, retrieving a small data chip, the culmination of weeks of tireless work, and held it up for Rykov's benefit. "This is the proof," she said softly, watching his face as comprehension dawned on him. "The evidence of your crimes. You can't erase or manipulate this." Rykov's eyes bulged with panic as he realized the gravity of their situation. He had underestimated Eva and Jackson, underestimating their determination to bring him down. His empire was crumbling around him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "You'll never get away with this," he pleaded. But his voice lacked conviction. Eva saw the defeat in his eyes. "We already have," she replied calmly, her gaze fixed on the man who had once wielded such power over her. "You've lost everything." And as they took Rykov into custody, the culmination of their high-stakes gamble, Eva felt a sense of justice wash over her, a bittersweet reward for her journey from disgraced scientist to whistleblower and advocate. In that moment, she knew that the fight was far from over, that there would be more battles ahead in the war against election manipulation and AI exploitation. but she also sensed an unyielding resolve within herself, one that would guide her every step of the way as she strove to protect the integrity of democracy itself. And so, with Rykov's confession echoing through the halls of Zephyr HQ, the truth about their nefarious activities finally exposed. Eva and Jackson emerged from the shadows, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with courage, conviction, and a fierce determination to safeguard the future. Eva and Jackson watched as Rykov was led away in handcuffs, his empire in shambles around him, a testament to their unwavering persistence. The air inside Zephyr's headquarters felt heavy with the weight of exposed secrets and shattered dreams. It would take time for the full extent of the damage to be tallied. But one thing was clear. Rykov's reign of terror was over. As they made their way out of the crumbling building, a symbol of unchecked ambition and greed, Eva couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over her. She had done it. She had brought down Zephyr and exposed the truth about their election tampering, no matter the personal cost. But as she glanced at Jackson, his expression unreadable behind the veil of sunglasses, a flicker of unease stirred within her. He had been an ally in this battle against Zephyr, but Eva still wasn't entirely sure where he stood on matters of ethics and morality. His motives remained opaque, clouded by the shadows that seemed to follow him wherever he went. And while she couldn't deny their shared goal of taking down Rykov's empire, she wondered if there were other agendas at play, ones that might not align with her own. "Where are we headed now?" Eva asked, breaking the silence as they stepped out into the bright California sun, a stark contrast to the dimly lit corridors of Zephyr HQ. The city hummed around them, a bustling metropolis, hungry for news and eager to move on from the scandal that had just unfolded. "I have some contacts within the government who are keen to hear our story," Jackson replied, his voice low and measured. "They're willing to offer us protection in exchange for full disclosure about Zephyr's activities." Eva raised an eyebrow, sensing a hint of something more beneath the surface of his words. Protection sounded like a convenient excuse for keeping her in check, a means of controlling the narrative surrounding Zephyr's downfall. And as much as she wanted to believe that Jackson was genuinely committed to exposing election manipulation and AI exploitation, she couldn't shake the feeling that he might be playing both sides against each other. "I want to tell my story," Eva insisted, drawing a steadying breath. "But I won't do it on anyone's terms but mine. I have a reputation to rebuild, and I won't let them define me as a liability, a pawn in their game of political chess." Jackson paused, his gaze drifting towards the sprawling cityscape before him, the very same metropolis where Eva had once called home, until Zephyr's betrayal had forced her into hiding. A flicker of understanding seemed to cross his features, and he nodded slowly. "We'll approach this together on our own terms. No one gets to control your narrative but you." Eva felt a surge of gratitude towards him, a sense that maybe, just maybe, she had misjudged him all along. Perhaps their shared experiences in the trenches against Zephyr had forged an unspoken bond between them, one rooted in trust and mutual respect. Together they began walking down the bustling city streets, two unlikely allies, navigating a world where truth was often buried beneath layers of deception and propaganda. And as they disappeared into the urban maze, Eva couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden and who else might be watching their every move. For now, though, she had won a hard-fought victory over Rykov and Zephyr, a testament to her unwavering commitment to ethics and integrity in AI development. And with Jackson by her side, his true allegiances still unclear, but his dedication to the cause undeniable, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to confront the dark underbelly of politics and technology head-on. The real fight was only just beginning, and Eva was prepared to stand tall against it all, armed with nothing more than her unyielding conviction in the power of truth. Eva's thoughts were still reeling as they made their way through the city, navigating past protesters and reporters clamoring for a piece of the action. She'd finally exposed Zephyr Corp and brought Alexander Rykov to justice. But at what cost? The mental toll of her past mistakes and the constant scrutiny she now faced weighed heavily on her shoulders. "We need to get off the streets," Jackson said abruptly, his eyes scanning the crowded sidewalks with a hint of concern. "Too many cameras and microphones out here." "Agreed." Eva nodded, pulling her hood up slightly to shield her face from any lingering paparazzi. They ducked down an alleyway, away from the main thoroughfares. "So where are we headed?" Jackson glanced at his watch before responding. "We have a meeting with Senator Johnson's campaign team in a few hours. He's been vocal about his support for tighter regulations on political advertising and data privacy, which could potentially impact Zephyr's future projects." Eva's eyebrows shot up, intrigued by the news. "Really? That's quite a turnaround from his stance last year." "I know," Jackson said with a wry smile. "Rykoff was one of his biggest donors back then. But now that he's facing potential indictment, Johnson is reevaluating his priorities." They continued walking in silence for a while, lost in their own thoughts and concerns about the future. Eva couldn't shake off the feeling that she was being watched, a paranoia born from her years on the run and the constant fear of discovery. As they turned onto another street, Jackson suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. "Wait here," he murmured, pulling out his phone to scan the area before disappearing into a nearby coffee shop. Curious about what had caught his attention, Eva lingered by the entrance, eyeing the passing pedestrians with caution. She spotted at least 3 different reporters lurking around the vicinity, likely waiting for either of them to make an appearance. Just as she was starting to worry that Jackson might have gotten himself into trouble, he re-emerged from the coffee shop, a steaming cup in hand. "I saw Rykoff's people trying to tail us," he said quietly, handing her the drink before taking one for himself. "Nothing we can handle, but I didn't want them getting any closer." Eva took a grateful sip of the hot beverage coffee. She hoped with its familiar warmth seeping through her palms and into her chilled bones. It wasn't long before Jackson pulled out his phone again, this time with an air of urgency about him. "What is it?" Eva asked, sensing the shift in his demeanor. "We've got a breakthrough," he said, eyes shining with excitement. "Senator Johnson's people have found evidence linking Zephyr directly to Rykoff's election rigging efforts." Eva felt her heart skip a beat. This was the proof they'd been searching for to put an end to the corrupt practices plaguing their political system. "Where is it?" she asked, already imagining the impact this would have on the ongoing legal proceedings and Zephyr's reputation in general. "It's encrypted," Jackson replied with a shrug. "But Johnson's team claims they can crack it within the next 24 hours. The prospect of finally holding Rykoff accountable sent a surge of adrenaline coursing through Eva's veins. She knew that once this evidence came to light, there'd be no going back for Zephyr or for her own personal demons. "What do we do in the meantime?" she asked, already mentally preparing herself for the upcoming showdown with Rykoff and his cohorts. "We wait," Jackson said simply, "and make sure our ducks are all in a row before presenting this evidence to the public." Eva nodded, aware that patience was no longer an option. They had the upper hand now, but she knew Zephyr would stop at nothing to regain control of their narrative and discredit her yet again. As the sun began dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the urban landscape, Eva felt a newfound sense of resolve burning within her. She'd faced down Alexander Rykoff on live television, and it was time to prepare for whatever lay ahead, armed with nothing but her unwavering commitment to truth, integrity, and the power of data. The real fight was just beginning, but Eva was ready to face it head-on. As the hours ticked by at a glacial pace, Eva found herself staring out the window of their safe house, lost in thought. Her mind raced with all that had transpired over the past few months. The algorithm's catastrophic failure, her subsequent exile from her own name and identity, Alexander Rykoff's relentless pursuit to exploit her creation for political gain, and finally, the stunning revelation of Zephyr's election-rigging schemes. The world outside seemed frozen in time while she waited for Johnson's team to crack the encrypted evidence. The coffee shop below was bustling with activity, but Eva barely registered it. All that mattered was the impending showdown with Rykoff and her own role as a whistleblower in exposing his crimes. "Hey, focus," Jackson said gently, snapping her out of her reverie. He handed her a steaming cup of tea, a small smile playing on his lips. "You done more than enough already to bring Zephyr down." Eva took the offered drink and wrapped her hands around it for warmth. "I just can't help but think about how close I came to destroying everything," she confessed. The memory of those innocent lives ruined by her algorithm still haunted her. "You weren't alone in that failure," Jackson countered, his voice steady and reassuring. "We learn from our mistakes, and you've proven yourself 1,000 times over since then." She looked at him, searching for the sincerity behind his words, and found it. The young activist had been an unexpected ally, yet he'd stood by her through thick and thin. "What if Zephyr tries to discredit me again?" she asked, voicing her deepest fear. "They could dig up my past mistakes, but you've already taken the high road in owning those errors publicly. That's a testament to your integrity and willingness to learn from them." Eva frowned, not entirely convinced by his reassurances. She knew Rykov's tactics all too well, how he'd twist her past into ammunition against her. But Jackson's words stirred something within her, resolve to stand firm in the face of such attacks. A sudden burst of activity outside caught their attention as a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb below, its tinted windows reflecting the neon lights of the coffee shop's sign. Two figures emerged. The first was Johnson, his graying hair tousled from sleepless nights, while the second was an unfamiliar man with a stern expression and a briefcase in hand. "Looks like our waiting game is over," Jackson remarked, already reaching for his phone to alert their contacts that the evidence had arrived. As Ava watched Johnson and his companion make their way up the stairs, her heart began to race with anticipation. This was it, the moment when everything she'd fought for would either pay off or come crashing down around her. She stood tall as they entered, the briefcase clutched tightly in the newcomer's hand. "You must be Johnson," she said, extending a hand in greeting. "Indeed," he replied, shaking it firmly before turning to address Jackson. "We've managed to crack their encryption." The words hung in the air like a promise, as Eva felt her resolve harden into steel. She'd faced down Alexander Rykov and survived. Now, with this evidence in hand, she was ready to confront him once more, this time on ground of her own choosing. "Let's do this," she said, her voice steady and determined. "Time to expose Zephyr for what they truly are." And with that, the battle for truth began in the courtrooms, in the media, and ultimately in the hearts and minds of those who would shape the future. Ava had come a long way since her exile. She'd found redemption through her unwavering commitment to integrity and technology. As the world watched, eager to learn from both her triumphs and failures, one thing was clear. Eva Reyes would forever be remembered as a beacon of hope for those seeking transparency and accountability in the age of artificial intelligence.